As a project manager, your project exists within a complex and evolving ecosystem of stakeholders and project managers who are the managers of projects that you are related to in some way. Having a simple and concise way of analysing and determining that ecosystem is a vital part of project management. Traditional project management saw stakeholders as this mass of people that primarily were a problem, and the focus looked internal, and many project managers did what they could to minimise the impact of stakeholders. But if you think about it even for a minute, that model is so wrong. The reason the project exists, the reason you're doing your job, is for those stakeholders. Now, the word stakeholder is a really interesting word to me. It means a person who's got an impact with or an impacted to or some relationship with the project. But I prefer another version, which is a stakeholder is a person with a stake, very long and very sharp. And if you don't build and maintain open and transparent relationships with those stakeholders, you'll meet that version of a stakeholder waiting at the end of your project, typically with their sharp stakes, waiting for you to come out of the project. The model that we use is a very simple one. Now, there are other models of stakeholder analysis. There's the RACI model, the responsible, accountable, consulted, informed. There is what are called affinity maps, which are also very powerful. But being as we are focused on simple but powerful tools, the model I like to use is to triage your stakeholders and the related projects into three classes: critical, essential, and interested parties. Critical stakeholders are the folks that have a veto. I don't mean a veto in the sense of I'm not going to support the project at all. The veto means this: if a decision needs to be made in your project, these critical stakeholders have to agree with this decision. They have to buy in and sign off before you can continue. In effect, they can stop your project from delivering, or worse, they can stop your project from succeeding after you go live. So critical stakeholders are people you've got to build relationships with, maintain them, and as I'm going to talk about, communicate to them regularly, preferably face-to-face, and we'll pick this up in later tutorials. Essential stakeholders are delayers. So for example, you might have someone from outside the organisation that you need, but if they perhaps withdraw or they move over or turn over, then you can find someone else to replace that person. So essentials are delayers. They can't stop you from delivering the project, but essential stakeholders can actually delay you. And of course, then there's interested parties. These are folks who, as long as they're communicated with, as long as they know what's going on, will typically remain passive. They are folks who have a right to know what's going on, but do not have a critical or an essential role in your project. So, find out who your critical stakeholders are. Engage them, preferably face-to-face. If they're critical, it's worth your while to go to their place of work, to actually meet them face-to-face and consult and pre-consult with them when there are major decisions to be made. Critical stakeholders, the leaders of those would be the perfect constituencies of a steering committee. So your ideal steering committee is all the leaders of the critical stakeholder group. Essentials you can communicate to, but my recommendation is, because they are essential, you should check whether that communication has been received. So it's like a two-way, but not necessarily face-to-face. Interested parties, all the tricks of work. Newsletters, updates, status report copies, little informal bulletins if you want, anything to keep them in the loop. The thing that I've found, which you've got to be careful about, is if interested parties feel they're not being communicated with, then they can change their status very quickly. A final note on stakeholders and stakeholder scans. When you're doing your scan for stakeholders before you determine critical, essential, and interested party, You must be conscious of, going back to our previous tutorial, of the whole of life model. So there's going to be stakeholders who are impacted or engaged during the project life cycle. People tend to get that pretty right. But there's another group of stakeholders who have to live with, operate and support whatever you're delivering in your project, the outputs. So they are just as important as the stakeholders you need to build it. There's a third group of stakeholders whose role is to benefit realize from your project. They are typically termed benefit owners, but they are just another group of stakeholders who can be critical, essential, and interested parties who are actually engaged in not building it, not supporting it, but realizing the benefits of the project.